So our demo is going to be about creating a calculator using React and Node.js. And so we have here just a basic calculator, nothing crazy, but the whole thing is going to be created with React. And so we'll be using JavaScript, we'll be installing React and installing the various components such as Node.js and the different NPM solutions that we need. So as you can see, the calculator works just fine. And now let's go ahead and let's go and install the different tools that we need. So the first one is going to be Node.js, and we do a Google search on Node.js. We always start with Google searches because it's the easiest way to find things. And so we go to the default Node.js site, and you can go to downloads. And there are Windows, Mac OS, and also Linux installers. You can also download the original source code and compile it yourself if you want. You'll also need a text editor. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. It's just my favorite text editor. It's free, works across all platforms. It comes with a ton of extensions, so you can get up and running really quickly with it. So we're just going to go ahead and install the Windows version. I already have it installed, so I don't have to download it again. And you also want to make sure that you have the latest version of Node.js installed. With the Node Package Manager. So we're just going to open up our terminal window and validate which version that we have running. And we can do that fairly easily. We can just put in node -- version, and it'll tell us which version, which means that it's installed. And the same thing with npm Node Package Manager. We'll do npm -- version, and that will give us back the version number. Again, you have to have them installed for them to be able to do that. And we're going to also now create a React app. So we're going to do install, and then it's going to be create -react -app. That's the command to create a new React app. And we're going to install it right off our desktop. So let's go in and we'll put npx create -react -app. And then the app is going to be called Calculator, which will install a folder on our desktop with all the appropriate React code. And this will be just a template application, but it'll have everything there that we need to get started with. Hit return, and that'll take a few minutes just to install everything. And here we go. And so as we go through some of the components that we're going to be creating today, we're going to be creating an app component, and there'll be the main component that has all the information that will then be displayed on the screen. Then we have a layout component, and there will be the actual look and feel of the calculator, and the output component, which will be the results from the calculator, and then the output row. And this will be all the different tools that we will need. And here we have our new folder right there on our desktop. But we're actually going to go now into Visual Studio. And if you've seen any of the other Node.js videos that we've created, you know that I like to work with Node.js in Visual Studio Code because I can run terminal window right there. So I'm going to open up the folder that we just created. That's called Calculator. I want to open up the whole folder, not a file, but the whole folder. And here's our folder on the left-hand side. We have all the different files. Here's our JSON package that has the instructions for what the calculator looks like, including which version of React and the DOM. And here's our default elements. And as you can see, because we're using React, it's going to embed the code into a HTML page. And so we have a div with the ID of root that's going to reference some class files that we create. And so the app.js file has the application code that we're going to be modifying in a little bit. And you'll see that it actually then references up to our index.js file. And if an index.js file, it has the ID element root, which ties back to the ID element of root in our HTML file. So we're constantly referencing and cross-referencing our application. And this is where we're going to be doing most of our work. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open up the terminal window. And the first thing we want to do is start npm. And it's now going to have everything running on, it's going to have localhost and everything running on port 3001. We'll give that a moment, and this will actually then bring up just the standard default React boilerplate app. It's just taking a moment to load. Should probably get a faster computer. Oh, hey, there we are. Just not patient. So here we have our basic boilerplate ReactJS application. Nothing too crazy here. So let's actually go in and start working in some of our code. So let's see now. Yep, everything's running where we expect it to run. All right, so let's go into app.js. And we can actually go ahead, and if you want to type Control+C and actually stop the app, or you can in the terminal window, you can actually stop it. You can also go up into the terminal command to stop it as well. And if we do stop the app, then we'll get an error message. There we go. The site can't be reached. And you'd expect this. We're going to go back in, and we're going to just restart our application. Everything should now be working just fine. We're going to refresh the page, and we'll see our default React app. Coming up on port 3001. And there we are. Looking good, looking good. Okay. So we're going to delete out what we have there because we want to put in our own content. And we're going to call this one class app, and we're going to go in and we're going to be modifying that class here in just a moment. We'll put in a default layout. I'm going to create a new folder. This folder is going to be called components. This is going to be for our calculator. And put a new file in there. We're going to call this one layout.js. And this is where we're going to start breaking down the structure of our layout. And we're going to select import layout. And then we want to do the path to our layout. Components, layout. And you notice that we have the dot because we have to go up one folder. That's the command for that. So dot up one folder, components folder, layout. Notice we don't have to type layout.js. It automatically knows to add the .js extension. Constantly making sure that we're saving. Let's go over to layout.js, and this is our layout. And we do this using CSS. So we're going to import React from React, and then select import. And then we're going to link to layout CSS. This is going to be a CSS file that we're going to create. So we're going to have to type that in, layout.css. And notice we had to write out explicitly that it's a CSS file. And so here we have And then we're going to put in the constructions for the layout, what our props look like. And then we'll export default layout so it can show up correctly. Okay, so we go to our web page now. Yep, that's good. We were expecting to see that. So we need to change some of our pathing here just quickly. So let's see now. We're going to move a file so that it can be accessed appropriately. Rerun this. You know what? I think we didn't. We have to update. Yep, I know. We have to go back to layout and we have to start adding in some values here so that the application knows to lay content out. So we just put in a hello world. There we are. Okay, so that shows us that everything is pulling through correctly. So we want to get rid of hello because we're going to replace that with our own application. I'm going to change this div so that it actually starts pulling in the application. And we're going to put in the class name for calculator, and this will be a CSS reference. Okay, so we need to have some image files. And what we're doing here is we're essentially building up the different elements that will need to be presented on the screen. And then we'll have a CSS file that we'll use to create these elements. And as you can imagine, I've already got this written, so I'm cheating a little bit because I know what I'm putting here. But bottom line is that the calculator really is a bunch of form elements, such as buttons on the screen, but we're going to use CSS to reformat them so that it looks more like a traditional calculator. That's one of the things that you get comfortable working with when you're doing web applications, is how to take technologies that you're used to using and then modifying them so that they look different. And so in this instance, we're used to using button elements within an application. So why not use the same button elements, which consistently work from browser to browser, and then just simply update the look and feel of them with some CSS so that they look good. And here we are just doing a very simple on-click command. This is some basic JavaScript that will render inside of the browser itself. Okay, so now we see, boom, there's a button. All right, so, and again, you want to be constantly testing and verifying that the code you're writing is working correctly. And we're going to do another button, and this is going to be the delete button. So we're going to start building out our different buttons here. Alright, so let's delete. Now we have an on-click event for that. Okay, we're just doing some formatting here. Okay, so we just used going through our code here, make sure everything looks good. And one of the things we can now do, because we've got a baseline that looks correct, we can just copy that, and then we want the percentage sign and then the forward bracket. So this. So it gives us 2 buttons. So we have start a new row here. I'm just going to copy everything over, just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves. And then we're just going to pipe in the numbers 7, 8, 9, and then plus symbol. Sorry, the multiply symbol. And we'll be able to move these into multiple rows here in just a moment. And we just want to keep going through, making all the changes here so we actually fill out all the different elements. So as you can see, most of this isn't really complex. It's just the, we use the word fiddly. Yeah, I guess again, the fiddly parts of putting this content together. So we refresh our screen, we start seeing all the different elements. Okay, looking good. We'll have to come back and make some updates to our CSS class names. And then we do our final 3 buttons across the bottom. Okay, so let's now add some styles to the content that we've created. We do that in our layout.css file. And so we already have some styles that we created. So we're just going to go ahead and for the sake of brevity, we're just going to pull those over. We can, if you want to, and have us do a more detailed video on how to create the CSS files, then we'll certainly do that. But I think most of you probably know how to do this already. All right, so here's our CSS file. And so we have our calculator, our keys, our buttons, and the different types of button here. So we can just copy these all over. And so these all have the background color, the border color, etc., etc. And so when we do that, ta-da, here we have our buttons for our app. Easy way you know how. Okay, so we take out the CSS, and then we just have basic buttons. We add the CSS link back in. We have a nice laid out application. So we've got a couple of areas that are still missing. We've got the results screen and the default logo. So Let's go ahead and add that information in. And we'll create a new folder called assets. Underneath assets, we'll put another folder called font. And that'll be where our fonts will be. Then we'll create another folder and we'll call this one images. And we'll put our images in there. So we have our logo image, just Simplilearn logo. And then for layout, we can then just reference that in our image reference. So I'm going to import the logo. I'm going to import that from our assets folder. And under assets, we'll go to img, which is where we have our image. And then we'll do the path for the logo.png. So we'll move this. And then we'll do source. And we'll do the source is from our logo variable, which is has the import of the image. So we'll put the width. And we happen to know it's 150 pixels and there we go, it's 150 pixels wide. And the style that we'll reference from CSS will be block. So just some inline styling here. Generally, normally do this. I normally have all my styling in my CSS folder, but in this instance, because we're just putting up a solution, I want you to be able to see that you can actually do this inline. So there we are, have our Simplilearn logo. Okay, so now we need to have the results screen. Make sure that looks correct. Okay. And so we're going to create a new folder, and this is going to be called our output.js file. And this is going to control the output in that blue screen. We're going to import our React objects. And we'll export that. And we'll put a new file called output.row.js. So we'll put our instructions. This is going to be our component the users will put their results into. And output row. And we're going to put our instructions here. So we're going to export default output row. All right, so we're going to start putting together the code that allows us to construct our solution. We're going to update the output row.js file, and we're going to add in our return value. So we'll put a div, and this will be input type. So essentially we have a text field that will be read-only at the top of our calculator. And here we see our text field here. And that will allow us to be able to put in our values. And we use the class screen that allows us to go our formatting. And we're going to put a file. It's going to be output row.css. We're going to add in our specific CSS for this output row. And as you can see, we're just using all of our standard HTML5 skill sets here. And let's go over to our style. We'll pull in our props.text size. And then the default value. And so this is going to align with our, go over to our CSS file and we'll update that. And output.js. We'll make sure the results get returned correctly as we're tapping on the buttons. And so this will pull in our output row. And the value will be, we'll put in our text size for output flow here. And we're just going to put some sample CSS styling here. Nothing too crazy. And we're going to have 2 rows. Save that. And our 2 rows will appear in a moment. Let's go into our layout. Let's add in our rows. So this is our output. I'm going to pull in those values. And there we have our 2 values. And so we can apply some CSS styling to this. So the top row will be the calculation broken out as we've written it, and the bottom row will be the results. And let's go into our CSS file here. We're going to copy over some CSS, and you have some font styling. We have our screen class name. There's our screen here. Again, this is nothing, no rocket science here. If you've done any CSS editing, you'll be familiar with what we've done here. And you see that we're referring to a font asset. We don't actually have the font in there. We'll have to pull that font over. And it's just a TTF font, true type font. You can use any of the internet fonts as well. Google has a massive library of fonts. And there we are. We're going to change the size of our font so that the second row, the text is a little bit bigger. A little bit small. And we don't have anything wired up yet. We'll do that in a moment. That'll be the easy part of this assignment. All right, so let's go over and now layout. Okay, so let input, set input, and use state. That way we can default the initial state. And for the result, the use state, the initial use state will be just blank. There we go. This is what you'd expect to see. So the results are blank, and this is just when you run the app for the very first time. Okay, so we're going through, and now we want to put in our actions. So we're going to have an event when we click on any of the buttons. We want to take the value of the button, and so if it's going to be any of these actions here, and we're just going to put together our script to do the calculations. So as you can see so far, we've put most of this application, most of the hard work has been setting up the base React application, putting together the different files and folder structure, making sure we have the correct assets such as images, fonts, CSS files, laying out our core structure in HTML, form elements, and now the part that we're doing at the end here is putting together the script that will actually do our calculator events. And honestly, this is going to be we've got this running here. It's just JavaScript, so there are lots of JavaScript calculators on the internet, so you can actually take any of those and use those as a base for what we're doing here. And there we have if there's an error, we'll do math error result. We don't expect to see that. And we'll just keep putting together our code here. So our different results. So depending on which command you use, so for instance, if it's the equal sign, and you have the results. So we're using the value to actually then trigger what we would actually be seeing in which screen. Okay, that's looking good. So we'll capture our value, and this is all concatenated together. And if there are any error messages, so if the value is C from the button, so if we select C, so we want to set the input to 0, which is to reset the screen. And if the value equals, and this will be delete, what we want to do is we want to manipulate the string on the screen, which means we're going to eliminate the last character entered. And this is manipulation here. And this is all reducing the length of the string by 1 character at a time. Again, this is your standard JavaScript control. So we hit delete, and that gets rid of a character, another character. Hit it again, I'll get rid of the third character. And we'll put, if the string is 0, then we'll put that as the value. All right. This allows us to test out our application. All looking good so far. Okay. I want to make sure that we're then calculating our values correctly. And here we have the display and the input. It's all coming from here, our output class. And then we'll put in our results. Okay, it looks like we're lining everything up. Just always want to go back and double check that you have all your commands, all your variables lining up correctly. Eliminate those. And we'll make sure we have the answer and the user entered there. There we have the answer and the user, and we'll change the font size. We save that. We'll go over, and this is our local application. And we test it, we can start putting together our construct, and we'll see that our calculator is working. So clear gets rid of both values. Everything's looking pretty good. And here we have our first application, and this is the sample application. This is the application we just wrote. Here is the original application that we were testing against. And as you can see, everything lines up correctly. And so you've seen how in just 45 minutes, you can actually write out your own ReactJS application with Node.js. And so if we terminate the application, so this is the one we just built. It's going to fail, so it allows us to validate that we had actually created. We're going to restart the services. Say yes. We'll run it on another port because we already have an app running on another port. So it's going to run on 3001, refreshing the web page. And voila, there we are. There's our application up and running. Everything looks really good, working fine. It works absolutely identically. Now, if you want to, you could actually then take this application and make it a native application as well. Right now, we're just using it as a web application. And we're just updating some of the CSS, making it a little bit tighter. Everything looking exactly the same. There we go. That's your app all up and running.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.